As they neared the village, the child could see many other footpaths full of throngs converging to the whirlpool of the fair, and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. যেই মুহূর্তে তারা ভিলেজের কাছে পৌঁছালো, দ্য চাইল্ড কুড সি মেনি আদার ফুটপাথস ফুল অফ থ্রংস। আওয়াজ, কোলাহল, it was a chaotic place full of noise. The place was full of noise and converging to the whirlpool of the fair. It was nothing but the whirlpool of the fair, the noise of the fair, and felt at once repelled and fascinated by the confusion of the world he was entering. And he was fascinated, he was fully attracted by the confusion, by the noise of the world in which he was about to enter. A sweet meat seller hawked gulab jamun, rasgulla, barfi, jalebi at the corner of the entrance, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets decorated with leaves of silver and gold. এ সুইট মিট সেলার, একটা মিষ্টি বিক্রেতা, তখন হাঁকলো গুলাব জামুন, রসগুল্লা, বরফি, জলেবি, অ্যান্ড ইট ওয়াজ অ্যাট দ্য কর্নার অফ দ্য এন্ট্রান্স, জাস্ট অ্যাট দ্য কর্নার অফ দ্য এন্ট্রান্স অফ the fair. There sat a sweetmeat seller, and a crowd pressed round his counter at the foot of an architecture of many colored sweets. সেখানে বিভিন্ন কালারের সুইটস ছিল, প্রচুর লোকজন সেখানে ভিড় করেছিল। অ্যান্ড দ্য শপ ওয়াজ ডেকোরেটেড উইথ লিভস অফ সিলভার অ্যান্ড গোল্ড। সিলভার অ্যান্ড গোল্ড কালার্ড লিভস দিয়ে পুরো শপটা ডেকোরেটেড করা ছিল। The child stared open-eyed and his mouth watered. For what? For the barfi. That was his favorite sweet. Underline this sentence. The child stared open-eyed, বড় বড় চোখ করে তাকালো, and his mouth watered. Just the moment his mouth watered for the barfi, that was his favorite sweet. I want that barfi, he slowly murmured. But he half knew as he begged that his plea would not be heeded, because his parents would say he was greedy. So, without waiting for an answer, he moved on. He thought that seeing this situation, his father, his parents would told him that he was greedy. So, without telling anything, without waiting for an answer, he moved on. Then came a flower seller. He hawked a garland of gulmohar, a garland of gulmohar. The child seemed irresistibly drawn, and he went towards the basket where the flowers lay heaped, and half murmured, I want that garland. He went towards the basket. There he saw flowers lay heaped there, and he murmured that I want that garland. He wanted that garland, but he well knew his parents would refuse to buy him those flowers, because they would say that they were cheap, they were very cheap, so they would not buy any flower for him. So, without waiting for an answer, he again moved on. A man stood holding a pole with yellow, red, green, and purple balloons flying from it. A man stood there holding a pole, and there were various colors of balloons like yellow, red, green, purple, and it was in his pole. They are fastened to the pole which the man was holding and standing there. The child was simply carried away by the rainbow glory of the silken colors, and he was filled with an overwhelming desire to possess them all, the balloons, to possess all the balloons. It was the general attraction of every child. The balloons, it was very attracting, so he tried to possess all the balloons. But he well knew his parents would never buy him the balloons, because they would say he was too old to play with such toys. He was older to play with such toys. So he walked on further. A snake charmer stood playing a flute to a snake which coiled itself in a basket, its head raised in a graceful bend like the neck of a swan. While the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of an invisible waterfall. A snake charmer who was playing a flute in order to hypnotize the snake to a snake which was coiled itself in a basket, but it raised its head just like the neck of a swan, means rajhash. While the music stole into its invisible ears like the gentle rippling of an invisible waterfall. ঠিক দেখতে পাওয়া যাচ্ছে না এরকম একটা ওয়াটারফল ফোয়ারার মতন সেই আওয়াজটা হচ্ছিল। দ্য চাইল্ড ওয়েন্ট টুয়ার্ডস দ্য স্নেক চার্মার, বাট নোয়িং হিজ প্যারেন্টস হ্যাড ফরবিডেন হিম টু হিয়ার সাচ কোয়ার্স মিউজিক, ব্যাড music, loud music. As the snake charmer played, he proceeded further. He thought that his parents would scold him because they had forbidden him to hear such coarse music as the snake charmer played, and he proceeded further. There was a roundabout in full swing. Men, women, and children carried away in a whirling motion shrieked and cried with dizzy laughter. Everybody was very pleased. They were busy and they are moving on in an energetic manner. They were very busy. They shrieked and cried with dizzy laughter. The child watched them intently, and then he made a bold request. I want to go on the roundabout, please, father, mother. He wanted to go on the roundabout. There was no reply. He turned to look at his parents. They were not there. Ahead of him, he turned to look on either side. They were not there. He looked behind. There was no sign of them. A full, deep cry rose within his dry throat, and with a sudden jerk of his body, he ran from where he stood, crying in real fear, "Mother, father!" Tears rolled down from his eyes, hot and fierce. His flushed face was convulsed with fear. He was full of fear. Panic stricken, he ran to one side first, then to the other side, hither and thither, in all directions, knowing not where to go. "Mother, father!" he wailed, he cried. His yellow turban came untied and his clothes became muddy. Underline this sentence. His yellow turban came untied and his clothes became muddy. Color of the turban of the child was yellow. And what was his favorite sweet? It's barfi. Having run, now come to the next para. Having run to and fro in a rage of running for a while, he stood defeated, his cries suppressed into sobs. Then he was tired. He stood defeated after crying for a long time. Next, his cries suppressed into sobs. Now he was crying and it turned into sobs. Phupiye কাঁদছিল. At little distances on the green grass, he could see through his filmy eyes men and women talking. He tried to look intently among the patches of bright yellow clothes, but there was no sign of his father and mother among these people who seemed to laugh and talk just for the sake of laughing and talking. He ran quickly again, this time to a shrine to which people seemed to be crowding. He ran quickly this time to a shrine, that means temple, to which people seemed to be crowding. Every little inch of space here was congested with men. The place was fully crowded congested with men, but he ran through people's legs. His little soft lingering stays for a long time, continues for a long time, lasts for a long time. Mother, father, near the entrance to the temple, near the entrance to the temple, however, the crowd became very, very thick. Men jostled each other. They pushed each other. They jostled each other. Heavy men with flashing murderous eyes and heavy shoulders. The poor child struggled to thrust a way between their feet, but knocked to and fro. But the child struggled to thrust a way between their feet, but knocked to and fro by their brutal movements. But the child was unable to go through the thick crowd by their brutal movements, by their heavy body, by their heavy feet, brutal movements. He might have been trampled underfoot. He might have been trampled over by the people, by the men, by the heavy bodied men. Had he not shrieked at the highest pitch of his voice? He had shrieked at the highest, at the topmost pitch of his voice, "Father, mother!" A man in the surging crowd heard his cry, and stopping with great difficulty. At that moment, a man in the crowd heard his cry and stopped him with great difficulty, lifted him up in his arms. That the kind-hearted person who heard his cry and lifted him up, where? In his arms. "How did you get there, child? Whose baby are you?" the man asked as he stared clear of the mass. After coming out from the mass, from the gathering, the kind-hearted person asked the child, "Who are you? Whose baby are you? And how you get into that crowded place?" The child wept more bitterly than ever now and only cried, "I want my mother, I want my father." The man tried to soothe him by taking him to the roundabout. "Will you have a ride on the horse? তুমি কি ঘোড়ায় চাপবে?" he gently asked as he approached the ring. The child's throat tore into 1,000 shrill sobs, and he only shouted, "I want my mother and I want my father." সে ফুপিয়ে ফুপিয়ে জোর কেঁদে উঠল, বলল, "I want my mother and I want my father. I don't want to go into any roundabout." The man headed towards the place where the snake charmer still played on the flute to the swaying cobra. He took him to the snake charmer who was playing the flute to the swaying cobra. "Listen to that nice music, child," he pleaded. But the child shut his ears with his fingers and shouted his double-pitched strain, "I want my mother, I want my father." The man took him near the balloons, thinking the bright colors of the balloons would distract the child's attention and quieten him. "Would you like a rainbow-colored balloon?" he persuasively asked. But the child turned his eyes from the flying balloons and just sobbed, "I want my mother and I want my father." But it did not attract the child, but he moved away. He turned his head from the flying balloons, and just sobbed and cried, "I want my mother and I want my father." The man, still trying to make the child happy, bore him to the gate where the flower seller sat. "Look, can you smell those nice flowers, child? Would you like a garland to put round your neck?" The child turned his nose away from the basket and reiterated his sob, "I want my mother and I want my father." Thinking to humor his disconsolate charge by a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter of the sweet shop. Thinking to humor his disconsolate charge, thinking to normalize his mind, By a gift of sweets, the man took him to the counter of the sweet shop. What sweets would you like, child? He asked. The child turned his face from the sweet shop and only sobbed, I want my mother and I want my father. So, this is the end. In our next class, we will discuss about the question. Stay with us, and if you like it, please share and like my channel. Thank you.